Hey, this is Joey with Helping Others. And today we have a really cool podcast because we're interviewing Jennifer Idle and Alex Rose, who are these awesome scuba adventurers, documentarians, designers, photographers, videographers. They I think exude kind of what we think of as 21st century adventurers, where they're not only going out and doing interesting things, but they have tools with them to document it in very compelling ways, and then they can bring it back and share it in very compelling ways. So I'm really excited to have both of them on, and yeah, let's get started.
Thanks for having us. It's great to see you, Joey.
Yeah, no problem. I when I asked you to do this, you were like, "Yeah, that's cool." And then you were like, "Hey, can we have Alex on?" And I was like, "Yeah," because I actually got to talk to her when I was talking with you about doing this, and I
Yep.
was like, "Wow, yeah, this is going to be a really good dynamic." And because you know, in this space, it's very male dominated, the space that y'all are in, and the fact that we're able to like hook this up and hear y'all's perspective and to me was just like really really exciting because I think we can use like fresh views and opinions on something that a lot of people may even think of as kind of set, and it's not at all. I mean, this space is changing constantly.
It's a fluid space. And one of the things, like Alex and I have both been independent underwater photographers. We each run our own businesses. We are known in our industry and have a huge network between the two of us. But once you get into producing films and doing kind of larger projects with the kind of scope and impact we want to have, we found that having a partnership or having a collaboration really enhances your projects. And it's really hard in this space to find people you can trust, find people who have the same goals as you, and are willing to work as hard as you. So we've come together and over the
Yeah,
years, meeting at dive shows and working bit by bit and going on a trip here and there, have built a relationship where we realize that it's important to partner together.
absolutely. It's also important to find people who are able to tolerate each other's craziness, and we do really well with that.
We're like two sides of a coin. I'm morning, she's night.
Oof, oof. Yeah, that's for sure. Oof.
I'm like, hey, let's go shoot sunrise.
And I'm
And
like, cool, let's go shoot stars. Wait, no one's sleeping ever. Great.
we're like, we'll take a nap at 2. And no, we won't.
And
We're
no,
going to be
no, we
doing
won't. We'll
something
be
else.
shooting birds.
Yeah. We're like, we know the light's terrible, but we have to shoot,
Doesn't matter.
available subjects.
Closet birdist over there.
Uh-huh. We work pretty diligently and
Yeah, we
we're
get
we're
it done.
nature photographers and wildlife photographers and filmmakers. We're out kind of in the field a lot, and it's very different than working in a studio.
Very, but much more satisfying.
So I believe Jennifer has some slides to show us. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
she does.
I can absolutely share some things.
All right. Let's see what you got.
Oh, it's
Play.
so pretty.
Yes. So Alex has primarily worked in Asia as like her big background and experience as science editor for Ocean Geographic. And we'll get into that in a little bit. She'll tell you in detail what she does and all of the amazing projects that she does through them. And as you know, I work in the Caribbean and in the States primarily. So while I've gone to Asia and we've all shot around the world and Alex has shot here, we kind of had our focus areas. And I went on a 50 state adventure, which kind of launched my need to share our natural world with others and not just with my small community here in Texas. So Yellowstone is how Alex and I came together on a project. I've been telling her how diving Yellowstone National Park is a fantastic experience and everyone has to go there and see the amazing features that are down there. Not knowing how relevant and time sensitive some of these issues would become. So we came together, and I finally got her to go on a trip to Yellowstone with me to dive in cold water.
So much
which is,
convincing. Oh.
well, Asia also has warm water. So I have brought her over to the cold side, where we have to wear special equipment. There's heavier logistics involved in a lot of these things we're doing. They're not comfortable locations that I'm taking her to. So I got her to come with me on an adventure to Yellowstone, which quickly ballooned into something more. Now, what you're seeing here is kind of what Alex and I typically look like underwater. We don't normally brush our hair and look pretty, but we're trying for you.
Don't get used to it.
We're very rough. We camp. Camping does a couple of things for us. It gets us close to our subjects, gets us available so we can maximize the time that we're in the location. Particularly as we mentioned, those sunrises and sunsets and things like that. You don't want to be messing around with an hour drive to get to some room somewhere if you can help it. So underwater, we are completely different beasts with all kinds of equipment needs and an ever-growing arsenal of lights.
Oh, right? Ridiculous.
My journey and quest in diving the 50 states started ironically with the BP Horizon, Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. And I say ironically because this oil spill has followed us all the way into our current project and not just into the Yellowstone project. So for the last kind of 8 years, it has driven my career to help educate and inform people and show people how much there is to love in our local waters and to help them understand and maybe prevent accidents like the oil spill from happening. It damages economies, it damages people's lives, their health, and the environment, and all of the wildlife that depends on the Gulf of Mexico as its foraging and reproductive needs. So here you've got BP oil workers collecting oil off of the beach in Florida and Alabama at the beginning of my 50 state tour. I flew across the Deepwater Horizon oil spill and said, I have to do something about this, and resolved that that means let's just dive everywhere and show people what it's like, because I'm really good at taking a small concept and building it into something bigger than it should be. So I was like, I'll dive in all 50 states. And I set out a 5-year plan to get there, to show people what I felt was the best in each state. A lot of the diversity that we have in every body of water, from rivers to springs, ocean, gulf, reservoirs, lakes. Like, there's so many different types of water in which organisms and life depends. And especially as you get into the central United States, things like our aquifers are supplying us with our fresh water supply across the country. We need fresh water to live. It's very important. So in 4 years, 6 months, and 2 days, I completed my quest, driving and camping to a lot of places. And Alex and I are very self-made. So all of our expeditions have started out as personally funded projects, because we're passionate for sharing these stories and having an impact. As we get bigger and grow, we're looking for the right place to put some of our media to have a broader audience, be that online. I've got some new deals I'm gonna talk to Alex about later, which are very exciting.
Oh.
Yes, or opportunities at least.
Good.
So we're constantly looking for a place to share these with. My first place as a graphic designer was to create a book. And I created An American Immersion to cover the entire 50 state journey. You can see the first 25 states and the second 25 states are full with all kinds of imagery, wildlife, historic artifacts, very different environments.
Many cold places. You'll notice a theme here.
I'm from Texas, and I grew up, spending summers in Florida. I don't like cold water. I don't like being cold. but I love cold water diving. It's the weirdest thing.
Quite the conundrum.
Probably because I haven't had to live anywhere cold. I'm like, this is awesome. It's so unique and weird. Like when I went to Ohio, I was ice diving, and the news came out and they wanted to know why a Texan was ice diving. I said, well, it's very simple. We don't have ice in Texas. Our water does not freeze.
Yeah, it's. I've met Northerners that moved to Texas that just refuse to go back to the cold, and I think as Texans, I don't know, we just have an affinity for it because it's so rare to us that we don't think of it as like this long-term thing. It's like we do it, we tolerate it for however long we need to, and we just like come back. We're like, yeah, no big deal.
It's funny, and us Midwesterners feel the same way about the heat. So, like, oh, it's a temporary problem. Just wear less clothes for a bit, and you'll be fine. We'll be back to normal soon.
Yeah. So Alex is from Chicago, and they get snow up there.
Sure do.
She came down to Texas in September, and I was like, yeah, this is going to be a little different than Chicago. Don't bring anything warm.
Nothing warm.
Bring your shorts and flip-flops.
I'll take it. It was nice.
We even got sunburnt.
We did. Yeah.
The first day.
Oh,
We
bad
haven't
planning.
been out in the field like we should be, so we're not doing what we should
Forget about the essentials. Yeah.
So this is actually a cave in Texas. People often ask me, how is it a girl from Texas becomes an underwater photographer? We have water here, believe it or not, and we have some pretty awesome resources, particularly if you work with others on teams and you can get access to places that might not be publicly available. This is one such case. This is Jacobs Well Natural Area in Wimberley, Texas. It's about 45 minutes from my house, so not super far, but it's a pretty challenging dive. And I've enjoyed working there. I created an educational kiosk for that cave and natural area to help inform visitors along with my dive team. And we actually constructed it. I designed it. I shot the photos, and it helps inform people that things like aquifers and caves and karst formations are not bodies of water that you can put a straw in and suck it out and it will always be there. Because it's unseen, that is a problem that we face again and again and again in this particular area. Most recently with the Kinder Morgan pipeline, which was only deferred because Willie Nelson and another celebrity became involved and had them stop trawling through Central Texas to build this pipeline from West Texas to Houston. It was going to be extremely destructive if it continued, and possibly seep into our water supply that Central Texans depend on. And there are millions of Central Texans that live here. There's 2 to 3 million Central Texans that rely on these water sources being clean and available. Never mind that you also see we have endangered species in our springs. Ocarina Springs, now run as the Meadow Center for Water and the Environment, is home to 7 endangered species. So it's important to preserve these places, if not just for keeping a species from becoming extinct. We can't just remove species. And we'll talk about that when we get to our current story, Kempsrely sea turtles. On the coast of Texas, the Kempsrely sea turtles are a critically endangered sea turtle, and only 2 nesting beaches in the world, that on the northern coast of Yucatan and the beach along the coast of Texas, are where this sea turtle nests. Right now, they are trying to dismantle our program, and that is what we're trying to address in our film, Protected Waters Exploring Laguna Madre.
Wow, yeah, I have to say, that top right image, like if you don't smile looking at that image, you're heartless. I'm just saying it.
Agreed. You're bad.
And as you see, they're tiny. They're about the size of an Oreo cookie.
Oh, like
Which makes them even cuter.
like a macro shot, It's like we're going.
Yeah, you don't expect sea turtles to need a macro lens, but when they're babies, they are ridiculously tiny and vulnerable. So yeah, need all the help they can get.
I mean, you can see how people in sci-fi films get inspired by by reptiles just because their skin is so amazing. I mean, that it's like an earthiness to it that's just, I don't know.
There's something else. They're pretty amazing.
Yeah. No, this is cool.
Good.
I'm quiet because I'm just like taking this in, by the way, in case y'all are wondering. Normally,
no worries. There's a lot to think about.
Yes, and it just keeps going.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I mean, I grew up working. This is Dr. Donna Shaver on the left. She started the program, I believe, in 1971 on North Padre Island National Seashore as part of the National Park Service. And it is the National Park Service, in large part, that is now trying to defund this in favor of things like operations. Like they want to build a road along the sand dunes. And that's a bad idea for a number of reasons. Not only the fact that the sand dunes protect Texas shores from hurricanes. And if you've seen the recent hurricanes like Hurricane Hannah and a lot of things that have been going on, we need those sand dunes. So the hurricanes do enough taking out the sand dunes, but better that than taking out people's homes and livelihoods and just destroying all the land. So the sea turtles are facing a number of significant issues right now. And we're doing what we can to raise awareness for this. They're not taking from the budget in any significant way. Dr. Donna makes sure that grants fund the program. And recently they've said, no, we don't want to allow you to have external funding or grants to fund your program. They're wanting to get rid of it because it's a science and research program. And that doesn't make sense for a species that is so far from recovering. But this usually is my success story because Dr. Donna Shaver's program with incubating the eggs has helped the species multiply tenfold from where we were. Texas has a history. In the 1940s, we had a canning program for turtles where people canned turtles and it just destroyed all our sea turtle population. So we have directly influenced the decline of this species. And it only makes sense that we should also, in turn, try to help it thrive. It's connected. And this is where I was saying you can't just remove a species like with the Kinder Morgan pipeline. You can't run a pipeline through and say, okay, we don't need these little fish because we don't currently understand how they fit in the ecosystem. The sea turtles are a keystone species. You wouldn't have all the fishing operations if you didn't have the sea turtles and the foraging that they do to keep the seagrasses eaten in check, especially the green sea turtles that we have in the Laguna Madre. So that's where we kind of started talking about our Laguna Madre story.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the Laguna Madre? Just because like I know a lot about it as y'all, or I know some about it. But it's a really big kind of deal in terms of a space in Texas. It's one that if you're an angler, you know about because it has really good fishing. But people might not understand that the Laguna Madre is as exotic as many other places that Americans often aspire to go visit in terms of a natural refuge for an ecosystem of animals.
It's a hypersaline lagoon, and Alex will correct me on facts and numbers because I don't get those always right.
I'm always here for you with facts and numbers.
But I believe it's the world's largest hypersaline lagoon.
Yep.
And there are only 6 in the world.
Yep.
So it's a unique place because of that. And hypersaline means that it's saltier than the ocean. So that salt content, of course, impacts the wildlife in a number of ways, making it a great nursery for all those fish that people get to fish. For shrimp, you know, Texas has a huge Gulf shrimping industry. If the shrimp don't reproduce and make babies, then you lose your industry there. We saw direct impact on the shrimping industry from Deepwater Horizon when we killed off lots of them. And then you've got the turtle grasses, which the green sea turtles especially come in and eat. And 280 species of birds, Alex, is that right? Oh,
right, I'm on mute. 380 actually. Yeah,
380. Is that?
It's a lot of birds.
North America's birds?
Yeah, yep. It's a huge amount. And Laguna Madre accounts for 80% of all of Texas's seagrass beds, period. So Yeah, and it's a real hub of an ecosystem that is sort of a nursery, like you said, for a whole lot of important species, especially ones that are not just important to the ecology of an area, but important to the economy of an area, which is, why it speaks to people so much.
So half of North America's birds migrate to the Laguna Madre every year.
Yeah, that was
Mhm.
when I was doing my research on this for a project I did in grad school. That was one of the things that was like a really big deal then, was just the dredging that they were doing with boats, and how boats are like putting their anchors and not anchors, using
Reports.
outboards and
Yeah.
dredging, on these beds and just tearing them up and wreaking havoc. And and then in terms of the bird watching, that's another thing that a lot of people may or may not know about, is just how big Texas in general, and then the Laguna Madre specifically, has a huge bird watching scene. I mean, in Central Texas too, we have a really big bird watching scene. Many of our state parks have like spaces for you to bird watch in. I know Pedernales Falls, which is a state park in Texas, in Central Texas, they literally have like a space for you to go in and like set up and watch with binoculars and kind of show people like nature in a way that is very intimate, but also like respectful of the space. Because that was like another thing I've noticed is some, like, you have a fine line between experiencing it and being respectful of it. And it seems like that's definitely something y'all have also been kind of conscious of as well.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, we with the birding, we definitely saw lots of little spots around Laguna Madre that were set up specifically for people to be able to hang out and watch birds. And that's such a neat thing for people to be able to do. And that's always the issue with doing stuff underwater, is that it's sort of unseen. And it's great that there are places set up for people to watch birds and appreciate the topside landscape, but oftentimes underwater is taken for granted just because it's not visible. Like below the surface, the vast majority of people don't see it and probably don't really think about it, especially outside of a context of maybe fishing, or something recreational. But once you go underwater, such a huge portion of the ecosystem is under there, and it's usually one of the driving forces of the topside ecosystem too, which is why it's such a critical component of these stories, specifically the ones that we like to tell. Having a title like Protected Waters, it seems like the only thing we're going to be talking about are the waters, but that's definitely not the case. It's just that the water is usually the whole reason that the ecosystem on the top side is productive as well. So you have to kind of look below the surface to start to understand why all of it works and why it all fits together. The whole thing's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. If you start losing pieces, it's kind of hard to put back together the way it started. So yeah, I think that's one of the good things about telling stories the way we're trying to, is that we, try to focus on all parts of the ecosystem, not just the stuff we see.
And it's also why we illuminate what's underwater, because people don't understand the impacts we have. And when you're underwater, it can be overwhelming and feel like you're powerless to make change. I've seen, as you can see here, I'm showing trash underwater. I'm showing invasive species. There's quagga and zebra mussels, which have now reached Texas. And that can be devastating for endangered species, because as you see, they're covering one of our native clams here. Zebra and quagga mussels attach to every surface imaginable, which can remove nesting grounds, juvenile fishing ability to reproduce, and can wipe out populations. Never mind the damage they do to people's sewage and water systems, clogging up people's pipes and things like that reach into our reservoirs. So there's an economic impact from that on people. But it can feel overwhelming, and people sometimes think because they can't see what's underwater, they don't understand when something gets dropped underwater, or when we put things underwater or have an impact, or, like the Northeast has dealt with like sewage being dumped directly into the Chesapeake Bay, for instance, that it has an impact on those waters because they can't see what's going on. So in a way, we're kind of truth seekers and trying to show people, look, it's down there, we have an impact, and we can do something about it. And it's not overwhelming if everybody contributes. The collective impact of the individual is huge, and people forget about that. It's not just that the individual voice is important, but if we all have an individual voice that is speaking for the good of society, then we are ourselves a group of people really making huge change for the world around us. So Joey's face is just,
Indeed.
he's like, you're dropping some heavy bombs here.
So let's cool off underwater under this nice ice triangle.
You know, when we're growing up, we're told to follow our passions and to believe in our convictions and to go out and do good. And sometimes, like, when you go to do that, you run into things like this where it's overwhelming and one person can't fix this. And you can feel very defeated. And you can also, like, sometimes sound like a stumper, like you're stumping on this thing. And it's like, you're not meaning to, you're not, like, that's not what's going on here. What's going on here is that it's like, it's a journey in and of itself on how to translate and show others like this emotion that you're experiencing in these spaces, because your photos, like, they do a lot, but it's like, how do we reach people to get them to understand, like, this is where your water comes from, like, literally, this is where your food comes from, this is part of, like, do you like to eat, like, period, like, there's a whole system that goes to this, and we have to be conscious of our own agency. And so, it, like you said, like y'all were alluding to, and like you were saying, it was just, it's a big deal. And I like that y'all are kind of exploring that topic, but also that, like, you have a lot of other stuff that y'all are doing within this space, within the space of diving, and within the space of documenting both salt and water, freshwater experiences. But yeah, anyways, that ice. So what's up with that ice photo?
This was the ice diving in Ohio that I was talking about. Um, in preparing for some of these expeditions, this is actually leading into this endothermic shark species I'm showing you called salmon shark. And it's another species that's been overlooked as to its population. It's really hard to study shark populations in the first place. But with the Valdez oil spill, that decimated the herring population, and salmon sharks feed off of herring in a big way. So that population, because of their primary food source being depleted, took a hit, never mind the long line gill netting and a lot of the fishing practices up in the Gulf of Alaska that have been happening. And it wasn't until the last 20 to 40 years when we actually gained control over the waters around Alaska. Asia was coming and fishing out our populations, and you get bycatch for things like sharks. But other things like the ice diving lead into the sharks, because this is cold water diving. You need places to practice and build your skills and understand different environments in controlled places before you're faced with trying to tell the story of a wildlife, because your focus then needs to be on capturing split-second moments with these sharks, for instance. I mean, they look scary if you don't understand them, and we like to show them with their mouths open, in a feeding behavior, because they look scarier with their mouths open. If you see them with their mouths closed, they're not as intimidating. But these are really important species, and I'm working on a project that got delayed this year because Canada won't let me in because of but next year I'm hoping to return and talk about the cousins to the salmon sharks, the porbeagles, so that I can bring it back to the salmon shark conversation and talk about cold water sharks. They're not a shark that's widely covered. These are cousins to makos and great white sharks, which is why they look the way they do. They're called the body they belong in is called mackerel sharks. And they're by far my favorite family of sharks, if you are allowed to have a favorite.
You're allowed just this once.
But all of these unique experiences and unique stories build on one another and lead to one another. So you can't have gone to salmon sharks if you don't have experience in a dry suit, if you don't have experience with the logistics of managing that kind of thing. The water in Yellowstone is 40 degrees Fahrenheit at its warmest. So that requires some extra considerations and a lot of swearing.
Yeah, those are the primary considerations. How much can you swear in one sentence? That's important.
So the last salmon shark, that was in Alaska, correct?
That was in Alaska. And
Mhm.
Alaska is not as cold as you think it is in the southern part of Alaska. On the Outer Banks, it is, which is where those salmon sharks are presumed to reproduce. They don't know. They have an idea. That's the hard part about underwater. We get these split-second shots, and we're moving into film to address your point, Joey, about working and telling more of the story. Alex and I both write articles. I've written a book. We put these images with words to complete those phrases and thoughts. And we give presentations like this and others at dive shows and around the world with universities. We talked with Columbia University in Chicago recently. We're sharing with schools, with all kinds of different people, different aspects of what's going on underwater. But we're also producing films because film is such a richer way to give you a lot more senses of what's going on through your sight and the movement and more context than here's the moment in a photo. And it's so hard as photographers, we struggle with how do you capture context in one photo and show how it all relates. It's hard to do. People don't realize when you're producing a film, you have all the different angles of the same subject to fill in that information, even though the moment that you're going for, like you see in the photo, or the moment you see with a magnificent species is what carries that story. And again, in our photography, you're seeing moments like the paddlefish. I lead expeditions for these American paddlefish. They are the last of their species. The Asian paddlefish went extinct last year, or was declared extinct last year. So in America, this is the last of what we have. And they were once prolific all across from the Northeast all the way down into Oklahoma and almost into Texas. So they had a big range, but they're river fish. And when we dam our rivers, we prohibit them from successfully reproducing. So there are a lot of paddlefish farming that's going on to sustain the population. I would hate to see, I mean, this can grow to be a 6-foot long fish. So, and it's an impressive looking fish with that giant rostrum coming off the front. That's an electromagnetic sensory kind of nose to help them find microscopic organisms as they filter feed, just like basking sharks and whale sharks. So, and this is truly a prehistoric fish that's related to sturgeonfish. As you can see, Alex and I deep dive on anything that we get involved with in telling a story. And we learn a lot about the science behind the animal, how it relates to the world around it, and trying to give a broader story. We're not trying to just take the amazing photo, although we are also not opposed to taking that beautiful.
We'll take a photo just to take a photo anytime, but
yeah,
they're better when you have the story.
So all of these experiences, they build and roll into your capabilities. We've been building a specific set of skills. I've been diving for 24, 25 years. Alex has been diving, 15 or so?
Yeah, yep.
It's been she's younger than me, so.
Just a pinch.
It's just a pinch. It's not, it's not, significant, but it's not the overnight story. I think so often when somebody quote makes it big, or like when I completed the 50-state journey, people didn't realize that was 6 years in the making. It was 5 years for the journey and another year for the story to come out. People, they hear the end point because that's the bucketable, comprehensible thing. When you're working on these larger projects, it's harder to see how all these threads weave together because it looks like they're all disparate elements. The cave diving seems like it's different, except in Yellowstone, we used all of my cave diving training to get underwater to tell these stories. This is Newfoundland, the area in Canada where I'm working to talk about the porbeagles. And also historic significance as it relates to World War II. As a Texan, you can understand our history is different than the rest of the country. And we don't have as many ties to things like World War II or the Revolutionary War or some of those indigenous peoples' history that you have in other places. Although we do in Central Texas have the Clovis Indians that have been coming to Spring Lake.
But it's our story. It's Texans' story.
It is our story. But as a Texan, because
just different,
our unique place, I never appreciated these other things that they would tell us in school you have to care about in history. In school, I took all these classes, and social studies was my least able class. It was a bunch of numbers and memorization. It had no context for me until I started diving wrecks and seeing you're looking at a torpedo hole from a U-boat that blasted through a 400-foot long merchant ship. And you see the scale of the diver and the scale of that hole and just the ripped steel that came from a moment. Unless you understand the impact of what we are capable of, both positive and negative as a species, then it's hard to appreciate and understand how we fit in the ecosystem as well. So I didn't understand history till I started seeing history and going to places. You know, we don't have the same kind of battlegrounds. I mean, we go to the Alamo and it's a facade and it's kind of pretty. It's not the same as maybe going to San Jacinto or Goliad or the missions in El Paso, and you get kind of a better sense for some of that history and culture. But, you know, I can go diving in the Northeast and they have musket balls underwater. You know, that's just not something we have here from that part of the history. And that being said, in Corpus Christi, I showed Alex the USS Lexington, our World War II aircraft carrier. And I've been diving on her sister ship, the USS Oriskany in Florida. So I'll walk the decks of the Lexington to get a feel for planning my Oriskany dives, deep technical stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
So, you know, there are opportunities in your backyard to tell interesting stories. You just sometimes need to build on that experience and look at who you are, what you're trying to accomplish, and what is relevant to that story. I try to, I mean, some of storytelling is leaving out parts of the story. Not everyone needs to know how hard it is on me and Alex. Not everyone needs to know, you know, that we stuffed our faces with burritos every night.
Oh, they need to know that. They need to know that. It's critical.
Those were tacos, technically.
Whatever, taco burritos, whatever.
Yeah, like you think about your audience, right? You think about who is it that you know, that's consuming this content. If it's for photos, like there's so much room for interpretation that sometimes you putting yourself into it too much can actually diminish the audience that it reaches, where it can just be a little more universal. And then sometimes, like, there are photos that you take that are really personal and can have a story behind them that, you know, just you see the image one way when you look at it, and then you get the contextualization of it, and it really changes like how you see that space or that, you know, the image. Which, well, since y'all are shooting nature,
Yeah.
how you see that environment literally, like, no.
For sure. Well, and yeah, and well, so much of this storytelling process is just making people feel differently, because you can talk at people all day and you can show them stuff all day, but unless you can change how they feel about something, it doesn't really have the same impact. I mean, that's Maya Angelou quote, that's people will forget what you said and what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And that's kind of what we're going for with this, is like, if you watch something about our national parks in particular and feel the connection to that, it's going to make you want to go out and see it for yourself. And once you've seen it yourself, you don't forget that. So, you know, so much of what's important in our kind of storytelling, I think, is just making it making exploration accessible, so that people can see that this is stuff that we can all do, like we can all make an impact, we can all make a difference. And sometimes the first step on that path is just going to experience it and feel it for yourself. And yeah, that's, I think, with protected waters, sort of the general goal there is just to get people to feel it. Yeah.
So yeah.
I like the photo that we led into there. I like that.
That's the dive.
Isn't it pretty?
Yellowstone. That's Yellowstone Lake. That's 40-degree water.
Yeah.
It was not thawed until June. We showed up the week after the icebergs stopped pulling away from the shore.
It's also never that calm. That photo is a big fat lie, because that is a long exposure shot that Jennifer took at night so that it looks calm, but it is not, I can assure you.
It is a bit arduous. This is just typical packing for
typical packing, normal stuff.
We pack light. I mean, we go to remote places. We take our food. You have to take all the battery need that you could have and be able to cover the times when you can't recharge batteries. You have to have all of your computing power, your backup hard drives, the scuba equipment, the backup scuba equipment, the clothes, the backup clothes.
Food.
Yes, the tent, our house,
Everything.
So it gets entertaining, as I like to say, in the car. And this year, not only did we fill our giant SUV, but we had a box on the top.
This photo, and to be honest with y'all, what it reminds me of is since I drive from College Station where I teach, which is about 3 hours to where I run my hi-fi store in San Antonio, Texas, and so every weekend I always want to take too much, a pretty big SUV, and somehow I always end up having like to sprawl out like y'all are doing there. And I feel like I'm going on an expedition every weekend, and really I'm just supposed to be going to go run this shop, but I'm like, mics, we're gonna take my full camera rig just in case, we're gonna I have my full tool set just in case. I've got fishing equipment just in case. Like I've got
You never know.
everything like just in case. And my kid usually is in his car seat just
You're like, we'll bring the kid too, just in case.
still in there somewhere. So
that's funny.
But no, it's like as someone that admittedly, as y'all have come to find out, I'm really into gear. But my mentor Creston, who Jennifer got to meet, he was always like, gear's important, but you don't have to talk about it all the time. He would always tell me, because
impossible.
to a gearhead and not and forget about why you're doing it, which is the stories that you're trying to tell. And but like there's something really cool about that photo of y'all kind of, either unpacking or packing. It's that feeling of one, Tetris, two, like preparedness and decompressing, like when you're unloading, and there's just a moment of that, like both like the build up and the release when you're back. And I think that photo, because I'm an anthropologist, right? So I study people, I study culture. So it's like, I like that photo to me is like really, whereas y'all were probably, oh, we're just showing like show us packing up. I'm like, doing a full analysis, deconstructing like all the signifiers, like what kind of food you had in your bags, and that you used little square bags, and like what duffel bags you had, and like a pelican case, and like all these different things like I'm looking at. So just like kind of like how we
That's
have
funny.
this image up here is like, contextualizing nature. I'm like contextualizing the species that's studying the species, right?
Well, hey, all perspectives are important.
Alex and I do a lot of talking about how we do have to insert ourselves as kind of narrators for these stories to help people connect. While Alex and I, like, okay, I also have a small mammal problem, but
oh yeah, it's not a small problem, but it is a small mammal problem.
I'm obsessed with them. They're adorable because we don't really have small mammals in Texas like this. But we connect directly with the animal, and so we use ourselves as vehicles to translate for other people who might not get that opportunity to just have that. We break down the barrier between wildlife and nature and the person in the context, which is why we show some of the things like the packing and the tent to give people context that we're humans out there in this environment doing this. And maybe if people care about us, they will care about what we're trying to show them in the world around us.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was my I have a small mammal problem slide from Yellowstone.
I love it.
Yellowstone started on the 50-state journey. This is Doug Harder. He's a local diver, a great friend and dive buddy. Trey and Doug, were the first people I beat down in Yellowstone. Bless their hearts. They put up with so much with me because this is not easy diving. We're wearing a lot of equipment. It's altitude diving. It's cold water diving. It's not clear.
No.
And the spires are a GPS compass heading. It's not, I'm working on a map right now with a colleague. But up until we're working on this year and next year, you kind of just swim out there and swim down and then swim around and follow the landscape and learn that, to find the siliceous spires underwater, you have to find the bacterial mats surrounding the bacterial mats. If you're not on them, it can be a sandy kind of desert underwater. So finding by depth, by a compass heading, like really rudimentary skills, you land on these spires and then try to capture them. This is Gnostic algae in the shallow water. So you've got in the lake where it's closer and warmer and gets more light, you see more of the vegetation, some of the invertebrates there. And then the invertebrates continue out on these bacterial mats and on the spires themselves. So Alex and I went out there to study these and we found the granddaddy of all spires, which was awesome. That felt good. And we want to go back and do more and do it even better. And you're seeing here Benjamin Hatfield, who works at a dive shop in Idaho. So we connect with people all over the world. And too excited. There's sponges. I mean, it's alien life that are on these spires and these kinds
of cool.
And we talked about how timely telling the Yellowstone story was, because we're at a period where people seem to be forgetting why we protect our national parks, in particular, why it's important to support programs like the Kemp's-Ridley Sea Turtle Program. We wouldn't be able to enjoy this. Our children wouldn't be able to enjoy this. We wouldn't benefit from the diversity of the ecosystem, or we have to have these spaces set aside. President Roosevelt knew this when he set aside our national parks lands. If we don't set it aside and not develop it, it will become developed. It will become altered in a way that keeps us from having opportunities like this. There are thousands of children that get to see the Kemp's-Ridley Sea Turtle public hatchling releases and are educated and connected to their local waters. Dr. Donna Shaver told me in Corpus Christi at one point, like 75% of the kids there had never seen the ocean. And they live, right 15 miles from the ocean. So there are some needs to have educational programming and supporting of the wildlife to help kids also see possibilities and see that they can make a difference. They can do great things. They can participate in things, be that through your career or as volunteers or in different enriching areas of your life. There are volunteers, over 200 volunteers that run the Sea Turtle Patrol under Dr. Donna Shaver. And they go up and down the beaches looking for the Kemp's-Ridley sea turtles. But this program has also picked up the trash. Our beaches in Texas before the turtle program were known as kind of a trashy place to go. And by that, I mean literal pollution trash, accumulation of people coming out partying and leaving it out, or it just washing ashore from other places. So having the turtle program as a byproduct has also cleaned up our beaches, because when they're patrolling and they're not finding sea turtles, which happens a lot, they're also collecting all of the trash all up and down the coastline. And that's huge, that's significant. So we wanted to show people, particularly for the national parks and our waterways, our marine sanctuaries, all these different protected kinds of places, how necessary it is to keep it available for future generations. We don't know what we need tomorrow, which is why we need to make sure we have that today.
Yeah. So going back to your Yellowstone, when you said altitude, so do you
Elevation.
elevation and then like what's the depth of the spires?
So that's where altitude diving is different because you have depths and relative depths as it relates to getting decompression sickness for your dives. While it is only 55 feet deep, that's really more like 75 feet deep because you're at 7,000 foot altitude. So the higher you go, the less atmospheric pressure you have on your body, you then experience your bloodstream experiences a different intake of the gases that we breathe under pressure. And that impacts the amount of allowable dive time you have. So we learn physics and physiology in scuba diving as well. All those classes, like as a kid, I was like, oh, why do you need to learn all of these subjects? We truly use everything we've learned. I've actually relied on some of my high school biology classes in my career. And I'm like, why didn't I take biology in college?
Nobody made you do it.
But they made me do it in high school. And I am so grateful that they did because I have an understanding of how these things work. And I was listening, even if the teachers didn't think I was.
Yeah, no, I just asked because I was like, I was looking at that and I was, because obviously, or maybe not obviously, but obviously to me, like these photos are otherworldly, right? And and you can tell that the equipment that you're wearing, is different than just going scuba diving. It's like there is some considerations that you had to take into account for the temperature, and then also, like you said, for just being down there. And so, yeah, that's why I was interested. So 55 feet from the surface of 5,500 or 7,000 feet up.
Yeah.
And then like you were saying that like there's like a relative equivalency of like 75 feet at sea level or something, or
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. And so you all have like charts for that, or like how do you assess when you go? So it's like when you're going to go scuba diving, this is my layness of scuba diving. You work off of your elevation and then your depth.
We have a number of tools that we use. Tables were the initial tool, and those are like your backup analog solution. I have an app on my phone that will give me.
Okay, yeah, got it.
There's
an app for everything.
Yes, there are computer applications that we use for planning our big decompression dives, and then I write it down on underwater slates. And I carry my dive profiles with me underwater when I'm doing big dives to back up the dive computers that we're also taking with us. So there's a lot of help we have from technology now beyond just the tables. But especially in my diving career, I started with the analog systems. So I have a thorough understanding of how that all works.
So in a very practical way, what is y'all's typical dive times? I mean, I know it varies obviously depending on where you are, but like what's the range?
Generally,
that varies immensely. Yeah.
I mean, it can be 30 minutes. A bad one's 15 minutes. Sometimes that happens.
It does. It happens.
That's why every minute underwater is precious, because you're working with such a limited time to capture things. You can have up to 2 hours with fairly normal dive conditions. We can extend it with technical diving further. You have physical limitations sometimes in some of these cold and through other technologies like rebreathers and technical diving, you can extend your time underwater. But again, there are physical considerations you need to consider. Like I work on a dive team in Missouri, and we've had 16-hour dives with some of the team members. So it depends on what you're doing, but they're not spending 16 hours on the dive. They're spending an hour on the dive, and then they're spending 15 hours allowing their bodies to safely come back to the surface. So it doesn't extend your working time necessarily always. It just enables you to work in distant and deep places and challenging places for enough time to capture or accomplish your mission.
So your time to shoot is roughly between 5 minutes and 45 minutes, depending on like how much, depending relatively on how much time you have, because you have to have time to get ready to come back up and acclimate, is what you're.
Yeah, depending
Yeah,
on
that's
how
about right.
successful you are with getting there. And that's why it's so important, us showing all of those slides that show getting prepared and building the skill set so that you're efficient by the time you're on the job.
So
Hmm.
here's a question. When did you all like, and these are two answers, because I'm asking each of y'all, like, when did you go from liking to scuba dive to saying, hey, let's get crazy and get this camera with us down here, like a
I
professional level camera, like not just like, and when you were like, yeah, let's really dive into this. I had to, sorry.
I had to do it.
It took me 10 to 15 years, I think, before I really started turning pro, as we say. I dived. It was a hobby. It was just a passion and something I loved. And it quickly became more than that. But yeah, I think 10, 15 years. By the time I started my 50-state journey and I was shooting and building a book, I'd been underwater, I think, at least 15 years at that point.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something I just started and took a camera underwater doing. I started diving. I don't know, Alex, what you're.
Yeah, I mean, I started diving when I was 19. And again, it was just a fun thing. I'd always wanted to dive and just finally got around to doing it. And I don't think I really started seriously taking a camera underwater until about 7 years ago. And that's basically when I had started going to some of the dive trade shows. So like any hobby, there are places to congregate with people who also like the same things that you do. And we have quite a few dive shows. And one of the major ones happens in New Jersey every year, and it's called Beneath the Sea. And I started going to those, and we have a show in Chicago until recently. And once I started going to shows, it became apparent that there was a lot more to this than just a hobby to me. And I'd always enjoyed taking topside photos, and the two kind of got merged together when I started working for the company that I work for now, which is Ocean Geographic Magazine. It's an ocean conservation publication based out of Australia. And I met my now boss, Michael Au, at one of these dive shows and started writing articles for them. My background is in biology and marine biology. So started writing, and it became obvious that it was a bit ridiculous to always be sourcing other photos for my articles, and thought, you know what, I need to seriously try this underwater thing. But as you can imagine, gear is expensive for underwater cameras. Sometimes your housing is more expensive than your camera body. And then you start tacking on, yeah, or a car, depending on what you have. But yeah, when you put everything together, I mean, you have your housing, which is basically just a big box that makes your camera waterproof, hopefully, and a port that goes over the front that has to match with whatever lens you're using. And then you need lights and supplemental lights. And I mean, the whole thing gets expensive really quickly. And it's sort of a cost prohibitive thing for an entry-level person. And I was lucky enough that somebody recommended to me that I should apply for a grant from this really cool organization called the Women Divers Hall of Fame. And they have grants and scholarships, and I wound up getting one of their grants, which helped me pay for my first underwater camera housing, as well as more dive training. And that was actually what was able to let me launch into a career in underwater photography and environmental journalism. So yeah, it's the paths you take are oftentimes a bit meandering, but you get there.
Now, had you already learned how to do photography, like,
Topside, yeah. I'd
As
been.
had I shot professionally for my in-house graphic design job for 10, 12 years before I took my cameras underwater. Yeah. And then learning to shoot underwater is totally different.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like
sort of like starting over.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I was shooting with DSLRs and pro stuff. And when I went underwater with a camera, there's three considerations. One is the environment, because we are concerned about the environment. We don't want to damage it. And you can get distracted while diving with cameras. So first and foremost, you learn how to task load and not hurt the environment while you're working with the camera. So I started with compact cameras. So, like little Canon power shots, like, and, even today, like we all have these cell phones, they can shoot photos, although you should put them in waterproof housings.
Yes, we learned this recently. Water resistant is not waterproof, kids. Remember that.
Definitely not.
What do y'all shoot with? Y'all shoot Nikon? I can't remember.
I shoot Nikon.
Both. She shoots Nikon, I'm Canon.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. And I started professionally shooting Nikon topside. So that was kind of, once you get into a direction with a line, you learn that and kind of stay with it.
Yeah, you're locked in.
Right now we're looking into other video camera options. You know,
How's the video been? What happened there?
It was a necessary shift. Well, you know, we love doing stills, and this is always a bit of a battle with both of us, because we're still photographers. That's what we do. But just the way social media has just engulfed every part of everyone's lives, it's so important to have a piece of content that connects with people more actively. That's not just, here, view this photo and take it in. I mean, that's a quick swipe through, you know, people might not look at that. But when you're looking at video, it's really much more engaging and it draws people in. And especially with nature content, there's so much to be seen that can't necessarily just be garnered from a single photo. And while you can tell a lot of aspects of a story in a single image, it's much more engaging to do that through a video format. So we've just kind of realized that we need to do both. And it's a great way to tell stories. I mean, being able to show video really sucks people in and hopefully invites them to join us under the waves.
You know, Joey, that I've dabbled in video throughout the years. You helped me with my first project in university, you know, and I started out in graphic design, and we studied a lot of things, photography. There was, you know, the film project we got to work on. And then, like Alex said, over the years, you just kind of need to broaden your story. So I kind of dabbled here and there, especially with the advent of social media, in needing to kind of show motion and show people. Like Alex and I both lead expeditions. We lead people to these places to help them connect personally in small groups that are, you know, not overwhelming to the environment. And they're also not inexpensive for guests, but we give them a personal and intimate experience with wildlife and nature. And in so doing, we also have to show them what's going on in our trips. Like when I led humpback whale trip for Big Fish Expeditions last year, I also put out a short little video off my phone that I compiled of the trip so people could see what was going on with the whales or the shark safari that I led. So I put together these little short films also to just immerse people in the experience that we take them on firsthand. I do have a trailer on Yellowstone. I don't know what you're showing people if we want to skip past the trailer. I've been showing the still photos or.
Yeah, I can show it on my side.
That's the Laguna Madre one. This is the Yellowstone one. I don't know if you want to show Laguna Madre, if we want to drop that, or if you want to see Yellowstone.
You can show this.
This one's like 30 seconds.
Oh, that's fine.
And brand new. Oh, well, yeah, Yellowstone is on.
This one.
Yeah.
So it's more of a bumper than a trailer, but
that's right.
Well, and y'all are, I mean, like, you know, filmmaking is such a journey. It's
it sure is.
Such another layer. And I mean, I'm constantly learning myself. I'm a horrible filmmaker, but I just put stuff out there. That's my approach. Is I just keep putting it out there. But yeah, no, like so y'all are so did you have to change any of the way of the equipment that you had when you went to go do video underwater?
More lights. You always need more light. Yeah. And it's mainly just it's some camera settings, but it's also more of a mindset change. Yeah, it's one of those things where you always want to shoot both. You'll go into something and be like, oh, I'll shoot video first, or I'll shoot stills first, and then I'll switch. And it's just really not an easy thing to do. Just the way you're seeing things and the scenes that you're looking at and the way you want to show something is just not the same. And I feel like if you try to do both, at once, you're going to do a mediocre job at both of them. So it's a little tough because you kind of have to pick. It's like, are you going to shoot photos today or are you going to shoot video today? Because your head's got to be in it fully one way or the other.
And the video,
so that's been a change for us.
So like one of y'all take photo, one of y'all take video?
Sometimes, but we usually, honestly, what it generally is that we shoot really different things. Like luckily Jennifer and I see things very differently underwater and topside, which is great. Jennifer is more of a wide angle person, and I'm more of a macro person, which is great, so that you're telling two completely different aspects of the same story. So we try to kind of lean into that tendency, and just focus on the different parts of the story. So yeah, it works.
So y'all will go, if you're gonna shoot video, both of you, and then if we're gonna shoot photos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wondered as a content creator, because I do
It's
both,
tough.
but it's very like it took a mindset, and I'm talking top side because I don't know, it's a whole nother layer when you're scuba diving as well. But like I know for me, since I shoot both photo and video at the same time, pretty much 90% of the time, it just takes a whole nother kind of level of thinking when I'm doing it. But I also I see you all as a team, and so that's why I was kind of wondering maybe you all split it up. But I see how y'all split it up as in like different shots, and that makes. And then circling back, if you want to go get photos, we'll do a whole session with that, because like you said, it's a time-based thing too.
Yeah.
When you're there.
Well, especially like we really like doing sunrise and sunset stuff, and that is a super narrow window. And if you want to get the sun coming up or the sun going down, that is one only, unless you've got two different systems where you can set your camera up to do video for a time lapse or something, and then you go off and take photos somewhere else. That's sort of the only way you can do it. But unless you've got multiple systems to be using, you're kind of locked in.
You kind of need to be manning your camera.
Yeah, you do.
To see, do I need to change? Is this working as I expected? Because things like sunrise and sunset are also dynamic.
Yep.
So it's like, do I need to get more of an angle on this? Is this having the depth of field that I want? Is the setting, like you kind of have to still, it kills us to not take the photos.
It does. It's so hard.
We swear so much.
When I'm in that situation, I pull out my cell phone and I'm
that's what we do. We just do quick little cell phone photos. It's like, well, it's something.
I've got 2 Nikons running and a cell phone and a GoPro.
All the things.
Yeah, but
all the things.
You kind of still need to manage those devices. You can't just let go of one device and go, okay, this is on regular time lapse, it's ready to go. And you have to get all kinds of different shots, because not to use a cliche, but you see in sitcoms or something, you'll see they'll have the scene shot, they'll have the closer shot, and then they'll have the detail shot with all 3 cameras. We're only 2 people right now doing all of those shots. So if we set up a sunset or sunrise, we have to do that, and then we have to constantly be thinking, okay, how else can we tell this story with this one sunset? So you might have 3 of the same sunset or sunrise in one of our films, and it looks totally different, because it's a different perspective on the same scene, and the light changes
rapidly.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I learned early on when I started doing my filmmaking. Was just I've always pretty much shot solo. Sometimes I shoot with other people, but I just always wide, medium, close up, wide, medium, close up. And same for photos. Like if I'm documenting something that's going on, because I'm also always thinking about not just the photo that I want to ultimately show, but I'm such a documentarian, anthropologist. I want to show them the context that it was taken in. So I'll take a shot so they can see. And so, but I've done it now. I've been shooting this way for 12 years. Around 2007, 2008 is when I started shooting that way. And so now it's I'm literally I have my camera and I can flip it around and I know what my framing is.
Yes.
I know how to do little pans and little sides and just all these little things. that I think, I mean, I teach it in my classes, but I don't think that they're teaching this necessarily in university where, it's usually one extreme or the other where they didn't have enough budget and they're making you use your phone, or they have so much budget that you wouldn't use a phone. You know, why would you do that? And I'm like, well, no, it's the 21st century. Like, the iPhone 12 just came out with HDR video.
Yeah, they're ridiculously good.
It's like, well,
It's crazy.
it's constantly changing as to what we can do. I was telling my students the other day, I was like, I sound old, but like seriously, when we were in school, like to go shoot video, there was a huge barrier to entry, and same
Mhm.
thing for underwater photography. By the way, it was a huge barrier.
Yeah,
Well, now, like you said, to an extent, you can probably just get a cover for your phone and start that way,
you
and
definitely
you can
can.
get some amazingly legitimate photos with a little LED light that you hold,
Hmm.
just starting off. You know what I mean? Like you could probably fake it actually and look pretty good doing it. And
Probably better than you would with a comprehensive system, actually.
yeah,
Yeah, shockingly well. Yeah,
There are competitions that are compact camera or mobile camera that are
yeah.
dedicated to those categories too, in both film and photography.
And the images are stunning.
yeah. And so,
Yeah.
I'm telling my students this, and I'm like, and so, why am I telling all this? Well, I'm telling them it because it means that the onus is actually more on you all now. It means
Hmm.
you've got to come up with the ideas. You have to have the story. And for people that are on the flip side, for the professors and professionals that have been resistant to changing over and trying new things, it means that one, we're going to have a gap in education. If we
Mm,
have the professors learning how to do this, we're going to have a gap
yep.
because they're going to be resistant to teaching the students this, and the students are going to think that they're somehow bad for doing this, and they're not. And
Right.
and so what I've like done in my teaching is just be like, I want you, like I'm a passion first approach kind of creative teacher. I'm like, the tool is secondary. Like, tell me what you want to do, then we'll figure out what tool you need. Well, I really want to go scuba diving and take photos. I'm like, okay, well, what do you got? Like,
But what are you going to do with that? I mean, we get that all the time. How can I be an underwater photographer? Well, it's a broad field.
yeah,
Not everyone shoots nature.
Yeah.
Some people shoot exclusively wrecks, or fashion isn't underwater. I mean,
Yeah.
where are you wanting to go, or modeling underwater? Like they're different aspects of a broader. It's not just I want to shoot underwater. What are you going to do with it?
right. And so yeah, so we're in a really cool time. I think we're in a really cool time where
It's
uh,
exciting.
we're getting to
Yeah.
works that go beyond, a book, go beyond a photo, go beyond a video or a movie. We're able to create like this experiential learning where they're getting a little bit of everything of that. So I don't know. I really like that you all are thinking about this from a media side and then also from, like a preservation side and an ecological side. Ooh, what's
Yeah. Oh,
This is
geez.
Alex.
Okay, fine, fine. I'll switch over. Do you want to do this, or do you want me to switch over to my stuff?
You can switch over, and I'm gonna cue it
Oh,
up.
Joey, would you let me share screen?
Yeah.
oh, yeah. Okay. Well, you should be able to. It's Jen that's
It's me who needs to. She's talking to me,
Yeah.
and I need to stop sharing. And
Yes, stop it. No.
well, Alex and I also started with 3 other of our friends. Alex and I own a festival called Wave Film Fest, and started this with our inaugural film festival last year.
Mhm.
We're planning in October of, or no, that was this year. This year was the end. My goodness.
It's quarantine. Nobody knows.
This year. So next year we've got our second film festival that we're getting ready to announce and launch. We need to get back on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, to the point of what are you going to do with all this footage? We've also created spaces where it's meaningful to connect with an audience to share. So we built our own film festival focused on waters exclusively, and not just the pretty ocean waters with the pretty Raja Ampat and the Caribbean and the traditional like tropical stories, but all stories as they relate to water. because traditionally in a lot of the dive shows and dive arenas, they have a certain kind of look they're going for. And Alex and I just kind of break all of the
We
rules of
step all over their look. I like it. All right, here, I won't spend a lot of time on this stuff, but just so you have a touch of background.
On Alex as well.
Yeah, this is me looking really comfortable in Yellowstone. Not at all. So I don't do a ton of dry suit diving. This was sort of my first major excursion that was not on a dive boat. This was sort of, a different forum. So yeah, it's a lot of walking into water with tons of gear and trying to look like you know what you're doing. So we'll see if that was successful or not. But yeah, this was from one of our first days of attempting to dive the spires in Yellowstone. So you can see the water's not blue, it's very green. And it makes for a difficult shooting condition sometimes because it's also not the best visibility. But when you have the right gear, it makes anything possible. So as far as my more usual stuff, hold on, let me get this going. Yeah, so this picture popped up before. This is me doing what I'm normally doing with the magazine. So like I said earlier, I work for Ocean Geographic magazine, and it's a quarterly ocean conservation publication based out of Sydney. And we've been around for 15 years. I've been with them for 7, and I'm their science editor. So I write articles and do underwater photography and make sure that everything that comes through there is correct and accurate as it can be. So part of what I do for them is outside of the magazine, the trade shows, and we also run expeditions. So we sort of, not this year, of course, but normally we do between 4 and 6 trips every year, dive trips to places all around the world. And then every 3 years or so, we run a large scale expedition that's part of a different branch of what we do called Elysium. So Elysium, the word itself, is meant to refer to an idyllic place, whether it's real or in your mind. Elysium is sort of like this perfect place or perfect construct. So we try to go to places that are extremely remote, hard to get to, and as untouched as you get on planet Earth. So the first one was to the Antarctic in 2010. I was not with the magazine at that point, so I've not been to Antarctica yet, but it's obviously real high on the list. And then our next one was in 2015 to the Arctic. We spent 3 weeks traveling around the European Arctic with 66 people from 19 different countries. So it's a very multidisciplinary group. And then our most recent one was in 2018 to Raja Ampat in Indonesia. So all of these, with all of our Elysium expeditions, the common theme is to draw attention to the impacts of climate change while exposing people to these really remote places that are being impacted by our collective actions on planet Earth, even if we're not seeing them. So that's why we try to pick these places that are hard to get to. The reason we don't do them very often is because it takes quite a few years to get the proper funding together to do, a 60 to 70 person expedition. It's a lot of planning and a lot of funding and a lot of outreach. So we don't do them often, but when we do, we try to go really big. So yeah, I project manage for them with that. So it's another aspect of my job that's really enjoyable and lets me do some very cool stuff in interesting places. We've been doing a lot of webinars since quarantine times. We're up to over 60 webinars since April now. It's a lot. We were doing 4 a week when we started, just because we were all going insane. And now we've cut it down to maybe 1 or 2, which is still kind of a lot, but much more manageable, especially now that we're trying to get back to life a little bit. But we do these webinars with people in a wide range of different disciplines, but all connected to the dive industry in some way. And we started doing panels as well, which has been great. We did one with all these lovely ladies who are on screen who are actually all mermaids. They're professional mermaids in the dive industry, but also have this major push to talk about conservation and ocean preservation as part of their mermaiding activities. So they're not just, women swimming in tails looking pretty, like they're using it as a platform to connect primarily with kids and get them to understand the importance and the beauty of our ocean environments in a way that isn't just talking at them, but involving them in a way that's so fun because it's this mythical creature, everyone's favorite, telling you about the ocean and why you should love it just like they do. So yeah, we've been trying to do all these panels and webinars, and it's a great way to stay connected with people, even when we can't be out there actively seeing our friends and working with them out in the field. We'll get to that in 2021, hopefully. But yeah, we've been keeping busy. So Jennifer actually built me my entire site for my company and designed my logo and all of my stuff because, you know, Jennifer does everything, which is great. And so I have Blue Ring. Blue Ring is a company that I started in 2017, and it began simply as just a $25 annual membership that allowed people to marry the ocean. So you'd get a ring or a pendant like these lovely ones. And every year I donate 71% of my annual proceeds to a different ocean conservation nonprofit. 71%, of course, because 71% of our planet is made up of the sea. So it seemed an appropriate number to give back. But it's expanded from there. It was initially just rings and pendants, but now I've got a whole sustainable product line, including locally made masks. And then I've got stainless steel water bottles, metal straws, reusable produce bags, and bamboo utensil sets. So it's all stuff that's an inexpensive way to make a difference. Because like we were talking about earlier, sometimes these ocean conservation issues and just environmental conservation issues in general are so large that they're really polarizing, and you feel like you as one person cannot possibly make a difference. And it's a bad place to be in because it paralyzes you and you don't do anything then, and then you feel worse about it. So really one of the best things you can do is just find these small ways to get connected with your local waters and make a difference in a way that collectively can have a really major impact. So I try to focus on these small things through Blue Ring, and that's been a great experience. These are just some images of places I've been, and one image of me underwater being all modelly with my hair down. As you can imagine, long hair and diving doesn't really mix so well. So
it does, because you can tie it up real easy.
Yes, it's usually up in a bun, and Jennifer can attest to this. I am always have a bun on my head. And even so much so that when I wear a hood, I cut a slit in the top of the hood and then pull my bun through the hood. And it looks quite ridiculous, but it's a great way to keep your hair out of your face.
Your hair sticking up in the dry.
Yeah, it's always just, bloop. Yeah.
And I was all like, that's crazy.
It looks funny. But so far, it's been the best way to not have it get tangled in anything important. But yeah, every once in a while, you can take cool pictures underwater with it if the current is cooperating. But yeah, I get to go some really great places with my job, which is amazing. That top photo with all the sweet lips, that school of fish is from Raja Ampat, Indonesia. That cool little shrimp is from the Philippines. The middle photo of all the corals is from Cuba. And then the polar bear is, of course, from the Arctic. And these are all places I've been able to go within the last 5 years. And it's really a privilege. And because of the places that I get to go and how much effort it takes to get there, I'm acutely aware that most people will never get to see these places firsthand, which is why it's so particularly important to me to take these images and tell these stories, because they're amazing places. And if you don't see them, it's a lot harder to care about them. And so you have to be out there making images, telling stories, kind of getting to the heart of it, which is just the incredible beauty of nature and how we all fit into it, no matter where on earth we live. So that's what I do. This is one of my stories from the magazine. I've had about, I don't know, 50 or 60 articles published with them in the years that I've worked for them. And one of my favorite ones was this. So there's this crazy place in the middle of the Pacific Ocean called Clipperton Atoll. It is the most remote atoll in the entire world. With good weather, it takes 96 hours to get there from land. So it's a beast of a commute. And you would think that somewhere this remote, this removed from humans, would be completely devoid of human impacts. But that is absolutely not the case. As you can see in this one image, there's plastic everywhere. So it's an atoll, which means it's a ringed island with a lagoon in the middle, of generally volcanic origin. And no one has lived on this island since 1955, when it was illegally, actually 1945, sorry, which was right after World War II, when we stationed ourselves there for a little bit. So no one's really been living there for quite a long time, and it's covered in plastic. Like, I walked the entire 8 miles of the island, and there was not a single step I took where I didn't step on plastic, which is insane. And it's sort of the perfect story to illustrate the fact that no matter where you are, there are no untouched places left on the planet. Our lifestyles, our throwaway lifestyles, have an impact absolutely everywhere on Earth, from the deep sea to the top of Mount Everest, to these tiny specks of land in the middle of the biggest ocean in the world. There is nowhere that isn't impacted by the choices that we make every single day. And that can be a good thing and a bad thing. It's obviously a bad thing when you look at the impact that our plastic pollution has, but it can be a really positive thing if you look at what a good impact every single one of us can have. So it's always this sort of two-sided coin, or two sides to a coin sort of story, where our impact can be either bad or good. It's just how you choose to live your life that makes the difference. So Clipperton was a major story that I was so glad to be able to cover, and a really hard place to get to, and it requires a lot of permits to get there. So it's not a spot that many people get to visit, and that was one of my favorite stories I've ever been able to cover. It was really exciting. Another thing that I like to talk about is hope in general, because there is a lot of doom and gloom everywhere, and it's very easy to get overwhelmed by that. And actually, in one of our last talks that we did at Columbia College, one of the questions was, how do you stay hopeful? And my answer was, you have to. There's really not an option. You can't let yourself get into a rut with this stuff. And it's very easy to stop seeing the good in places and people, and you can't allow yourself to do that. And in general, I like to remind myself of specific parts of the planet that are protected because of people being hopeful about our future. So one of my favorite nonprofits out there is Mission Blue, and it was founded by Dr. Sylvia Earle, the world's foremost oceanographer. She did a TED Talk in 2009 because she won the TED Prize. And she talked about creating a network of marine protected areas around the world called Hope Spots. And there are now, I think, 268 Hope Spots around the world. And this is just since 2009, which is great.
Lagoon Madre a hope
Yes.
spot.
Yes, we want to work on that. Pretty much everywhere we go, we're like, this should be a hope spot, which is true. And I mean, that's sort of the feeling that it's supposed to evoke in people. And it's not limited to exotic, beautiful places. It can be anywhere. It can be in someone's backyard practically, as long as it's a location that's got significance and importance in the grand scale of protecting our ocean. So it's generally places that either have species that are native just to the area, endemic species, endangered species, populations that require specific protections. And all of these places around the world, if connected and protected universally, could have a major impact on the long-term health of our oceans and ultimately us. So hope spots are kind of a nice reminder that while there's a lot of junk out there, there are a lot of people and a lot of organizations pushing and trying so hard to make sure that our future is secure. And that means having a healthy ocean. So yeah, I get to cover a lot of cool stories, sometimes sustainable seafood, sometimes marine protected areas, whatever it is. If it's underwater, I'm there. So it's all good. And occasionally you even catch me taking photos topside. Yay, Jennifer. So yeah, this was from one of our Yellowstone trips. This is actually in Rocky Mountain National Park, but that was on our trip back. Beautiful though, and it's great. It's just great to be out in nature. There is no better place to kind of figure out who you are, I think, than spending time in nature, either alone or with people who also get what you're there for. And can't wait to get back out there. Like I said, I'm not usually the one taking wide angle photos. I've usually got my face stuck into something tiny that no one else has even seen yet. I like to say that it's because I'm low to the ground. I'm a short person. I'm only 5'1". So I tend to see these things because I'm closer to them. But I think it's mainly just what you train your eyes to see. If you really try to focus on finding the small stuff and you get your eyes trained to see it, you'll see it. And it's just your own lens, I guess, for the world, not just on your camera, but the ones on your eyeballs. So yeah, just I'm usually a macro person.
How hard macro is.
Yeah, it's not easy, but man, it's rewarding when you get good images, just because you've tried so hard to show this thing that no one would notice. So this little guy in the picture is an amphipod. sort of a shrimp-like little crustacean. And this one was from Yellowstone. And they might not look like much, but they're very important because they form the basis of the entire ecosystem in Yellowstone Lake. And this is oftentimes the case with ecosystems. It's very easy to overlook the small stuff because it's hard to see. But at the end of the day, it's what makes the entire ecosystem run. And if you mess up a piece of the ecosystem, the whole thing tends to fall apart.
These little guys support grizzly bears.
Yeah, they do. At the end of the day, they do, because you've got these little amphipods that are eaten by fish, which are eaten by bears. And without them, all of the Yellowstone food chain would be different. And this is part of the story that we were wanting to tell, actually, is about these fish. So this is a native species called the Yellowstone cutthroat trout. It's a really beautiful fish, and it lives in the lakes and streams of Yellowstone National Park. Other places too, but this specific variety is native to Yellowstone and only there, which makes it special. It's also evolved to be an important part of the ecosystem. And as we keep talking about, when you shift something in the food chain, you can really do a lot of damage to the ecosystem. So this little amphipod was something that we photographed because it is a food animal. It's a prey item of the Yellowstone cutthroat trout. But the Yellowstone cutthroat trout, which used to be at the top of its aquatic food web, no longer is, because we added another species. So this was probably not intentional, but in somewhere around the 80s, the lake trout was introduced to Yellowstone. Still not sure if that was intentional or accidental, but regardless, it's there. And what happened is what we call in biology a trophic cascade. So when you add a level to the food web, it shifts the whole thing. It kind of has this cascading effect down the whole thing. So now, instead of the cutthroat trout, the native species, being the top predator in the aquatic ecosystem, the lake trout is on the top. And this shifts everything all the way down to the populations of amphipods, which is why monitoring the little guys can tell us everything about the rest of the population, because it tells us what's happening up the next level of this cascade. So what's happened and why this is an issue is because lake trout do not occupy the same ecological niche as the local species, the Yellowstone cutthroat trout. They actually eat them. And in addition to that, they don't spawn in the same places. So the native species spawns in the streams, which makes them an accessible food source to things like birds of prey and grizzly bears and otters and all of the other animals that feed on them. But the lake trout spawns in the middle of the deepest part of the lake in 400 feet of water, which means nothing in the ecosystem gets to eat them. So not only are they suppressing the species below them that feed the rest of Yellowstone, they're just taking that layer out entirely because they don't occupy it either. So this can be a problem. It shifts the ecosystem for everyone. Luckily, Yellowstone is on top of it. They're doing an amazing job trying to manage this new lake trout population, but it's hard. They spawn pretty extensively, and they add to their population by numbers in the thousands every single year. But
something like 100,000 a year.
300,000. They're removing 300,000 lake trout a year, and there are still tons of them. So, of course, there are many different regulations that have been put into place, one of them being gill netting, where you put a net in the water where the fish hopefully swim through them, get caught at their gills, and then you pull them all out, and that's that. And the recreational angling community is also really critical to this management, because people can go in and catch any number of lake trout that they want, but they have to be removed. It's not catch and release. It's you take them out. If you catch them, they're coming with you. Yeah, you gotta eat them, and I'm sure they're good. So that's helpful. They also use, this sounds weird, but they use the carcasses of all of the lake trout that they catch to essentially suffocate the eggs of the lake trout. So the way this works is that when bodies decompose, they use up a lot of the bacteria that break them down, use up a lot of oxygen, which creates an anoxic or oxygen poor environment. And if you dump all of these carcasses from the dead lake trout on top of the spawning areas for the lake trout, it will suck all of the oxygen out of the water, and then all of the eggs and the fry, the baby fish, will die. So they're actually using the lake trout bodies to suppress the lake trout reproduction, which is a very creative way to use what would be considered waste. So they've been doing this for over a decade now, and the numbers are consistently going down, and the numbers of cutthroat trout are also consistently going up, which is great. It's a slow process, but it is working, and just shows you with proper management, you can overcome pretty much any obstacle, even in a national park and with one as major as this.
But it requires funding and support.
It sure does. It sure does. And this whole thing impacts all of the species, even the bears that you see there, which was amazing to get to see. Jennifer shot this one with video, and I got pictures, but man, that was cool. Anyway, just Yellowstone in general is a really beautiful place, and our national parks in particular are probably the best thing that America has ever done. And they're just so important to protect, not just because of their natural beauty, but for what they represent about what people are able to accomplish. The national parks are places that we've set aside because we need wild spaces. That's just part of having a whole ecosystem, and our country being connected is having wild spaces. They're critical for a whole variety of reasons, and keeping them wild is one of the most important things that we can continue doing, which is why we like to tell these stories, particularly about our national parks. A few pictures of me doing stuff in Yellowstone, setting up the underwater camera gear, obviously taking up a lot more space than if you were just crawling around on the ground, which is where you normally find me, crawling around on the ground. Looking at something. But you do get these stunning landscapes. You've got everything. I mean, from the tiny stuff all the way up to the big sweeping vistas. It's really a gorgeous place, and definitely worth visiting. It's also one of those things where collaboration can be key. Jennifer and I always work together on these, which is great. And then every once in a while, we're able to bring in somebody else to kind of help us, because as you can imagine, we're always focused on getting the nature footage, and it's really hard if you need to get footage of yourselves too. Like, that is a totally different mindset to go from, hey, let's photograph this tiny amphipod in the water, and then 20 minutes later, let's shoot ourselves talking about the amphipod. Like, it's a total shift, and it's something that we're getting used to, because we're still kind of our own two-person team. But it is nice to have somebody with you sometimes, who can sort of direct you into being a person instead of just the photographer. You kind of need all of the aspects. So yeah, collaboration is always key with this stuff.
And audio people.
Yeah. Oh, audio. Oof. Yeah. We need help with audio. Always. But yeah, so this is what we do. I have Blue Ring and I work for Ocean Geographic, and then Jennifer and I are working on Protected Waters. So
and
overall,
our sneak peek trailer that no one has seen.
Yeah.
Not been publicly released.
Wow.
Exciting.
I'm excited to see that.
Cool.
So I think it's awesome, one, that both of y'all have like your own companies, because one of the things I tell my students, and I talk to people in general now, I always say students, but really it's like anybody that I talk to, because I do like entrepreneurial talks as well. Yeah. Like I'm like immersed in the entrepreneurial scene in San Antonio, and I used to be in but not as much, because I haven't gotten to go there in a while. But I tell people, like, you just start doing it, and it starts coming together. And one of the things I think you were talking about, Jen, earlier was, when you got to all 50 states, scuba diving, it's different than what people think. It's like it's a great feeling and everything, but like there was a whole journey that you took to get there. And the journey is actually what is the payoff. But most people are very like, goal oriented. But really, it's like, for the adventurer, it's like, it's the adventure, it's like going and doing it.
It is.
And don't get me wrong, it's nice to have that feeling of accomplishment. But I think the same thing can be said for like entrepreneurship in general. It's like, yes, it's great to like hit these milestones, but it's also like that journey of going like, okay, like I got that LLC, I got this going, we're going to set this website up, we're going to start selling these things, I'm going to see if I can collaborate, how do we actually get a good ROI, return on investment.
That's the hardest part.
And,
yeah, that's the tough part.
Passion, it's like, how do you have to go and you have to research how everybody else is making money, like, and a lot of these passion spaces, people just they make a small fortune by starting with a large one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
For that in scuba diving. It's like, how do you make a small fortune in scuba diving?
You start with 2 million.
Yeah, you start with the large
How
one.
do you make $1 million in scuba diving, as the joke goes? You start with two.
Yeah, and it's the
It's
same
true
thing
though.
and for automotive spaces and pretty much anywhere where um, affluent people are going to have an edge, and like you have to figure out where is your edge, what is it in, and entrepreneurially, how do you keep your passion alive? That's not a hobby.
Hmm.
This isn't a hobby. This is something you do professionally, but that has different umbrellas that it falls under, and to be your own independent producer of content is a huge challenge. And for me, it's like I bootstrap, right? Obviously, I work at a university and I teach, and then I have my hi-fi store and I have my consulting that I do, and everything adds up to be, sustainable funds. But when I'm talking to my students, I'm explaining to them like, look, like you may go get a job, and that's cool. Like you may love your job, but you're also going to have opportunity to go and do an adventure
Hmm.
as an entrepreneur, and you can go and start these things, and part of that journey is like failing, and part of that journey is not doing it right the first time and having to
Yeah.
learn. So I'm
And
trying
that's where
like
having a job is great.
huh?
You can do these things on the side. It just means you work harder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm trying to get them to do it in college, which is so funny because it's like it's hard to get students to be okay with failing nowadays. They're just not used to it.
We talk about this all the time.
They're having a hard time,
Yeah.
and I'm so half glass full. Like this is how I talk. Like I'm not a balsa wood kicker, as I call them. In the art and the design school that you kind of remember, like they kind of rip everything apart and build you back up. Like I'm not that person. I'm like, I think you got to figure out who you are, and you got to become confident in it. But I'm not gonna rip you apart. Like that's just not my energy. That's not what I do. And I say this because it's like I really like um so many different aspects of what y'all are doing and how y'all are doing it, and just the energy that y'all exude while trying to do it. I did think about it did make me want to kind of figure out like, well, how can I get y'all interns? Because like I think it would like not like Steve Zissou style, but like it would be cool if
Yeah,
y'all.
we don't have the hats
We
yet. We
don't
still have to
we
get
don't
red
have
hats.
time for an intern because, an internship should be a paid internship if they're
Yeah.
going to be contributing directly to any of the projects or work that you're really working on.
Hmm.
Otherwise, it's a mentorship.
But I also or mentorship. Like I think about like, you know, you may think that an internship may be them going on an expedition with you, but it may be helping with your social media. It may be helping figure out what to do with your content, all the content that you have, and implementing ideas or learning some web design, and being able to either mentor them, as you said, or give them internship. But that's how one you can build out your space in terms of because that is how rich people make money. I mean, like
I have mentored some students and talked with them and have tried to work with people in different volunteer capacities and hope that they get something out of it. Um, you know, it doesn't contribute. It's like there's no way to get. I need to pay somebody if and have them be an employee or a contract hire to if they're going to actually help with my business language. Especially people take social media for granted in particular, and they just think you just say random things, but you don't. There's a lot of consideration that goes in every one of Alex and my postings, and
Yeah.
it's why like I've been buried under work the last 2 weeks. I haven't been on social media, which kills me because I need to get the word out about what I'm doing. But I don't have time to compose something meaningful. And even if it's something silly, you have thought through what that silly thing is going to say
Yeah.
and the impact it has on your brand. We're talking about brand development here. Like it's not just Instagramming food and telling silly stories, or like I have my Great Dane puppy, and we were saying like she would be one of those like reality YouTubers or like Instagram. She'd be like the model person, like, look how amazing I am in this environment. Like, but that's
She
not
totally is.
but that's not what Alex and I do. And we are original content creators. I've worked with clients in graphic design who want to just share memes because it gets them clicks and maybe it gets ideas. And creating original content is taxing. You know, it takes a lot. You could get likes or clicks or what or attention from sharing other people's media, but I try very specifically when I share something, it's something that's relevant to my brand. You know, there's lots of things in the world that I'm very concerned about. And I was telling Alex this the other day, but I can't insert myself on every meaningful cause out there, because then when I'm talking about a cause like the Kemp's Ridley sea turtles that demands attention, then people don't know what's really important about my brand or what I'm communicating.
Yeah. So I agree with you, but I challenge you because I think you know, one of the things as entrepreneurs and one of the things about adventurers and is that we're um we're very driven, but we're very hard headed.
Never.
Yeah, just a bit.
Criticism, well, fuck you, you know, like, but no, like, meaning it's like, just like like we don't want to experience failure with our brands either because they're our babies, you know, they're the things
Mhm.
we have in our identity and things like that. But I also see that that's where growth occurs. Like, one of the things is that we all get so busy that like we become our limiting factor of our brands. We become the limiting factor of what we're able.
Oh, absolutely.
And so that's why I encourage you to kind of think about it, not because you know, I think because everything you said just now is like I feel the exact same way, and so does my business partner, Christian. You know, at the hi-fi store, like that is how we run our social media. Like we only post to post things that are like going towards our brand, and the wording when we post it, how we post it, like all of those things are methodical. Our videos, I mean, it's Christian's like crazy about it, but Christian has also had huge success with social media. You know, he's someone that knows how to take brands and people and turn them into brands and marry them together. So, I mean, during COVID, he was like, my girlfriend has an Instagram account, and I see she's a peace officer, and he's a peace officer as well. And he's like, you know, I see all these peace officer accounts. I was like, he's like, dude, I bet you I can make her account blow up. And I was like, okay, I don't know. All right, man. Like, I mean, you're good at social media. So she had like 290 followers or something like that. He like did a screen capture and sent it to us, and she's almost at like 20,000 followers now. You know, and because he's just methodical
Wow.
and he thinks about like everything you're talking about. But if she just did that on her own, you know, it wouldn't be the same, right? It wouldn't have that same kind of feel. And so that's why I say like, you know, one of the things I noticed was just, to be honest with you, I like last night was when it was kind of really proven to me was that I just put together a lecture series, and I've been putting together lecture series for over 10 years. And this was the first time I realized that I worked with a group of people where I ended up not having any responsibilities the night of the lecture series. Like there was no need for me to be there other than that I happened to be there. And you realize like, you know, you hold on, and I'm in charge of it. Like you know, I got like $8,000 in funding to put this thing on, and you realize like you know, you want to kind of start creating these spaces where you have people that understand your vision, and that can be part of your brand. Is like, do you want to work with me? Like, here are some things to think about, you know, want to collaborate, and you're very honest and forthright. Like, you need to be driven, you need to be this, you need to be that. And that's kind of your mantra that you come up with. And I'm spitballing this, by the way. I'm not saying this what but what I'm saying is that as I've been looking into this and trying to help entrepreneurs kind of really, because I break down objections like what gives us anxiety, what makes us not want to be participatory. You know, it's like trust. Trust is a big one, you know, and then understanding of approach. You know, so I might trust you, but you may not understand what I'm doing at the core level, and so I can't have you be part of my business. Like I mean, as you can imagine, they're just like in scuba diving. There's a bunch of people that want to help sell hi-fi and that want to sell, you know, audio equipment, but it's like, dude, like, you know, I don't want you talking to the customers, you know, like, and
Not for everyone.
Yeah, and
Well, I get the, could I just carry your gear and come along with you?
right.
And the hard part is funding.
Yeah,
It's like
Yeah.
we're not getting paid enough to sustain somebody else economically.
Yeah.
We're barely economically viable ourselves.
Well, and we've spent so much time having people expect us to do so many things for free that we don't want that to push that expectation on other people either. Like as much as we'd like to say, "Oh, hey, come on, we'll do an internship or something." We really want to be able to financially support people because it really sucks when you can't. Like when somebody says, "Oh, it's a privilege to work with us." It's like, "Okay, well, that's kind of not a fair thing to do." Especially lately.
Especially the
Everyone's
people that
time
don't have
is
the
worth
budget.
something, and yeah, we don't want to be those people.
I agree and disagree with you all. Be-
Okay. That's allowed.
Only because, like I've mentored and had students that have interned with me that I'll take on things to go do stuff. Like one time, I had a student that was like, "I just want to help. If I can come in because I know you do car stuff. I'm really interested in cars." And I'm like, "Okay, well." Like to me, I'm like, okay, well, if I'm gonna go to this, I'll pick something arbitrary. I'm like, I'm going to the drag strip on Wednesday. If you're there, like, cool, and I'll just leave it at that. I won't say like this is an official thing. And if they're there, I'm like, ooh, this is interesting. All right, like let's see where this goes because what I'm really trying to do is build a relationship with someone.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to build a working relationship because it's like I don't need a worker. I need someone that's like gonna be there and would be there anyways, but is gonna learn. And so that's why, like, sometimes when, because I come from this communications background, so we talk about social, cultural, and economic capital, right? So money is just not one form of capital. You have social capital and cultural capital.
Know all about that.
Yeah, yeah. And everybody's like, "Oh, it'll look good on your resume." Like yesterday, I was listening to this lecture, and this professor was talking about, you can you need to have stuff on your resume, you need to fill your resume up. And I'm like, nah, I don't do that. I only do what I love. That's not part of
Yeah.
the job, then I'm out. Cause like, why would I want to get hired where they're going to expect me to do a bunch of crap I don't like doing, but it's on my resume?
Fair enough.
And so a lot of times what I'll do with like that, like for example, that student that was bugging me to go, just learn. I said, okay, well, I'm going to go to Houston for this thing called the super meetup. This was 7 years ago or something like that. And I said, if you're there, I'll meet up with you. And he's like, okay. So him and his friends show up. They want to meet. I had extra cameras. I gave them some cameras. They had some cameras too. And we go and we shoot a bunch of photos and video. I have them meet people, and we just start going back and forth, we start building a rapport. And I'm like, go do that, and he just starts and going and shooting his own things too. And then next thing I know, it's like he graduates. He doesn't know what he's going to do with his life, just like everybody else. And he's done all right, like financially, like he's okay. His parents have done well, but doing well doesn't mean you're going to go and get a job in this economy. By the way, that doesn't work that way.
No, we know all about that.
Yeah, and so um, he ended up going and working for Expel, which is like this for cars. They have this like clear plastic protectant you can put on the car, and it's pretty expensive. It's like $1,000 to $2,000, but it like is like a clear coat that protects your car. So he went and worked for them for a little bit. Then he went and worked for VP Racing, which is like a fuel company based out of Seguin, Texas. And so now he like manages all of their media. And like, this past last November 19th, I went to like a 300,000 person car convention, right? And it's like he's the one that like runs the booth and takes all the photos and works with everybody now. And it was like I was never looking to like have him work under me as much as like to challenge what I'm thinking about and what I think of as norms and stuff like that. And that's why I kind of challenge y'all, because it makes you have to like, as we get set in our ways, it makes you have to kind of reach back down and kind of have a reality check. But I've done it with so many different students where I do try and get people paid. I mean, it's nice. It's real. Like right now, I can because I got like that money right for that lecture series. So I'm literally getting to do that, and I'm like getting all the forms set up, and I'm getting stipends and all kinds of stuff. But when you build up a group of people that are just enthusiastic about it and want to work together and want to work to figure out how to make money doing it in a sincere, earnest way, it has power. It does. And I think y'all already have it. Just the two of y'all together. I mean, people see the value in it, but now it's just extracting that value out of the people that have the money. So it's either going to be your patrons, kind of like you're using your approach with patrons for $25, and you have to build brand awareness. And then you do design gen, and it's like you have your model, which is basically service based, right? So you're doing services and people are paying you, and that's how you afford like what you do to go out and do it. And I think for like people that are independently wealthy, it's like Jaws, right? Like if you ever remember the movie Jaws, it's like Richard Dreyfuss is over there, and they're just like, "How are you doing this?" Do you remember that? But I know Alex is laughing because she knows what he says.
I've never seen Jaws.
If you've never seen Jaws, it's like
Oh my God.
biologist who's gonna go with like this country bumpkin guy to go and get Jaws, right?
Yep.
And the sheriff is like there, like kind of mediating between the two of these these personalities. Who's like one is like wants to study the fish, the other one wants to blow the fish up, right? And the sheriff, they're like on the boat, kind of having a moment. He's like, dude, like, where did you get all this stuff? He's like, my family is independently wealthy.
Yep.
Like, there's like no, there's no
Like, okay, yeah, that seems right.
He's like, well, how much money? We have lots of money. How about that?
We'll start there. Lots.
Yeah, we don't.
Yeah, sort of changes the narrative when you don't have an unlimited budget.
Lots of passion.
Right, but that story is a story. Spielberg, who made the movie, was trying to exude. He was using, that's not just a character, that's a motif, right? That's like something that we see happening. I mean, that's what characters are used for in film. As you do more and more film studies, like I did, you realize that these characters are just motifs. They're not people. Like you can have the same character. You can have two characters that are the same character. Like I watched this movie called Whip the other day, and it's about this drummer, and the teacher is the student is the teacher. It's the same character. You just don't. I mean, you have to just think a little further than just what you're seeing on the screen. And I noticed that when we build our narratives of adventure, it's very hard for people to understand the lived side, like the financial side, versus what you're capturing. Even if you're capturing you doing it, they still think. And so what I had to do is I had to go and like research a bunch of different people that do what they're passionate about. Like there's a documentary called Bones Brigade, and it's about this guy, Stacy Peralta. And this guy Stacy Peralta was in this like skate group called the Zyphers. And there's this documentary called Lords of Dogtown, and there's a movie that came out called Lords of Dogtown. And so he was just an enthusiast for skateboarding, and so he started his own skateboarding crew called the Bones Brigade, and it had this guy named like Tony Hawk and Steve Caballero and like Rodney Mullen and like all of the millionaires now that just started off as like young kids. I mean, these were kids like 12 years old to like 15 years old that love skateboarding. And you see like in this documentary how they went from taking something that was totally not financially viable, and not financially viable for years, like years. That's the other part that I'm like, I'm still on the journey of, but I see the light of, is that it's like, this isn't like a 5-year thing that we're talking about, as y'all know. This isn't a 10-year thing. This is like 15 to 20 years. Like you start, but if you can see that as you're doing it, it just has a different feeling than feeling like you're being stepped on and choked on the whole time as you go through it. And that's kind of why I say, like, if one of the things I'm seeing, like, kind of as I'm doing this and looking back, is I'm seeing like, hey, if we take younger people with us on these journeys as we do it, they're going to help us later, like in ways that we just didn't think about. Like, yes, we knew more than them, but they're going to know more than us on these things that haven't come out yet and that aren't being done, that they're doing, that we weren't privy to. And they're going to keep us in the loop. I call it reciprocal mentoring. And so
I like that.
yeah, it's like, it's the difference between teaching someone how to like do woodworking and having a conversation with someone about woodworking while
Mm,
they do it.
yeah.
And so yeah, so that's like that's the one thing I was thinking about when I was talking, when I was hearing y'all's presentation and stuff, is that I feel like y'all are at that stage right after the clubhouse. I call it the clubhouse, which is where you almost have a business, right? But it's really
Right.
the clubhouse where everybody comes together and it's like, yeah, isn't this awesome? We're having so much fun, but like, how are we going to make money doing this?
Yeah.
That's like the tension. That's the tension. And I feel like both of y'all, through at least through what y'all presented, have broken away from the clubhouses. You have your own established brands, and y'all are going out on this adventure, solo and together at the same time as adventurers. I don't know. It's just really exciting. I just love that y'all took the time to talk and explore this topic, share this topic, share y'all's passion. That's what this podcast is all about. It's called Helping Others. So it's like, one, y'all's work is inherently about helping other people, and not just people, but like Mother Earth, or however you want to label, the
Yeah,
planet.
for sure.
And yeah, I just thank you so much. I know I
Oh,
kind
thank you. This has been a
of,
pleasure.
Thank you, Joey.
yeah, yeah. I'm just, I'm excited to see what y'all come up with. I'm excited. COVID is really hard. Like, I was thinking yesterday, and I wanted to show them about keying and green screen, and I was just like, you know, I looked up the projects I had, and I was like, we did this in class last time. Like, we all just went in class, and I put up a green screen, right?
Yeah.
And then like I would literally just be like, here, get your phone, because I wanted to show them how accessible it was. I wanted to show them how easy it was, and they would shoot with their phone, and then I'd be like, okay, now key it out in iMovie, and they're like, you can do that? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, your
Yeah.
food, whatever. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and we can't do that right now. We're very
No.
mediated in terms of what we can share and how we can share it. So, any little inkling y'all get out where y'all get to go and do something like and bring it back and show it, I think is just, and this time is really compelling.
Yeah, no, we think so too. And well, I think it's where the whole local exploration has so much impact, because it's really easy to feel like you're adventuring if you have to take a 17-hour flight to go somewhere and then take a bus to a train, and like it's sort of inherent in the whole journey is that it's going to be adventurous. But just walking outside can be the same thing. Like a couple months ago, I decided to just start doing some backyard video stuff and found like snails and slugs and all kinds of weird little stuff. And when you do macro in particular, it makes you feel like you're in a different world, even if you're just outside in your backyard. And that's sort of the feel of our whole thing, is that exploration to us is a lot more about how you see something than what you're actually going to see. And that's a feeling that can be translated to absolutely anything. And it can be something as simple as put a different lens on today, like the way you see and the way what your camera is seeing. Like just change your focus. And that's been particularly important during all of this quarantine time, because it's easy to kind of lose the plot and just get completely bogged down in the minutia of the daily junk that you have to deal with, and you have to keep the big picture and just keep moving forward and focus on the important stuff. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I like how you worded that about getting out. I mean, I'm very fortunate in that I have, I don't know, I just have agency to go around and do things. Like today, I was like, as y'all are talking and we're looking at all these fish, I'm like, I want to go to Lake Bryan, which is like 12 minutes from where I live downtown
Nice.
in Bryan, Texas. And so I can just drive out there, and I'll take my kid, I'll take like our little fishing rods, and we'll like walk around and go and see. And like you said, there's just all these little places you can go right now.
Mm-hmm.
And state parks are like full in Texas. I really,
Oh yeah,
you just
there's
can't
some
go.
amazing stuff.
Yeah,
So
parks are super busy. We were originally going to be for this year telling the story of Glacier National Park. But one of the conversations we had, because we need to social distance for a lot of reasons, was even if we could get into the park once they open them, we knew people would be desperate for getting out. And in
Mm-hmm.
local ways, people are not traveling broad like they were doing. They're not even going state to state to see families.
Right.
Families have been disconnected. We've all moved away from our family centers, or a lot of us have. And so people would spend summers, they'd like go to grandma's house for, the summer in Tennessee or whatever. And you can't do that right now.
Right.
So people are doing more centered, isolated, like state parks and national parks. But yeah,
Right.
it's super crowded. So, part of it is like, we're not going to those places. And
Right.
A lot of the work Alex and I do regularly is very remote. We've mentioned that a few times. It's also one of the reasons it makes it challenging for us to just bring someone along, because there are so many skill sets that we have to bring. Everything from wilderness knowledge, camping knowledge, cooking, feeding. Like, we have a saying, we're not your craft services. You need to cook your own food.
Yeah, there are a lot of facets to the whole process that you sometimes take for granted because it's just what you're used to doing. It's just what you do, and you don't think about it until you bring someone else along, and then you're like, oh, dang, this is a lot of extra work. And undoubtedly rewarding, but a time investment,
But we're physically tasked ourselves.
Yeah.
And to bring somebody along in addition to what we do, like, unfortunately, a lot of what we do, even if it's going to Laguna Madre and it seems like super close, it is, and it isn't the way we do it.
Right. So if we had a budget, things would be different.
Yes, and we would have an audio person.
Yes, we would. Dedicated audio.
So, it's just, I guess, because I did embedded ethnography where, like, I studied, this car culture stuff. It was just, I would go and do similar, quote, remote things where it was like, they would go out to Goliad, Texas, an airstrip for 3 days and take their RVs. And I would go with them. And I would just like drive my car because like I couldn't be a burden on them. I didn't, because like you don't want to influence, right? So I can't even get, I don't want to get paid because it's like, oh, I'm doing,
okay.
Right. And so I'm trying to study like their culture. But you end up doing like participatory ethnography where like I'm staying with them in the RV and it's like they bought this RV for $8,000, right? Like a normal RV is about 100 to 200.
It's a lot more.
Minimally, right? And they bought the RV so that they could look like everybody else at the racetrack, because they did bring some like $100,000 cars, customer cars that were built. This is back in like 2009.
Funny.
And you see them, they're all sleeping in the RV, like on the ground, anywhere that there's a spot. There's 8 people, and they're trying to make this work. And then you're next to someone that has like a $2 million setup, right? And like a cargo truck liner, 18-wheeler, right? And the RV and like, the support crew and all this stuff.
Wow.
So that's why it's like I challenge y'all, is just because it's like,
all right, we'll take it.
A lot of different spaces, you have to be hungry.
That's true.
That's true. The people that are going to persevere, and y'all have it.
The challenge is finding that person who's hungry, that isn't just wanting to do this because it seems fun or it seems cool.
My mom,
a lot of that underwater, especially. Like, I want to play, I want to learn to dive, and like I'm a dive instructor, and I can absolutely teach somebody the skills they need, but like I don't have time when I'm on assignment.
Yeah, we don't have the bandwidth for that.
No, it's like you're going to be on land doing topside. You're going to be doing these things. And I've tasked people with like small tasks on things that I've worked with. And it's like, I need you to do this small thing. And they're like, well, I want to do the big thing. They don't want to do the small thing. And it's like, well, I can't give you a bigger thing till you've completed the smaller thing. So I've run into some instances of that kind of thing. And I will certainly, I think there is room for that maybe in future project building where we need to build the structure to be able to do that. Like I've got a track program that I want to build, and I've been designing in the background, and
it's super awesome.
That could be a place where we could insert this
for sure.
But like a lot of the expeditions, like Alex can't bring someone else along on a no-G expedition. I can't bring someone else along on a big fish expedition.
We'd love to.
We'd love to, but they would have to be a paid participant and, you know, front 10 grand or 5 grand to be able to make that happen themselves. And
it's a lot to expect of a person.
Right.
You know,
it's so remote and so skint, a lot of what we're doing, that there's just not the latitude to bring somebody along, because there's so many skills.
Well, and I think this is where, Joey, you having a connection to a university is helpful in finding people that really fit into the exact position that you could need, because they're people that are actively building a skill set that fits into what you need, you know, and you know what they're capable of. And you can go, oh yeah, that person would be the right one. Like we wouldn't have that connection. And it would be like, I'm just going on what the person tells me. It's like, it's a gamble.
In Way Film Fest, we were working with some volunteers to get them to help with the social media campaign. And I had somebody who's like, oh, I'd love to do the social media. And so I set out the parameters. Here are the kind of posts I need. Here's what I need, blah, blah, blah. And then they went dark. Like they just,
you're like,
oh. Right. And I need to review it before you post it. But you need to create the post. You have the latitude to create these, insert your opinion, do these things. And then ultimately they were just like not able or willing or, you know,
or whatever. I don't know.
And that was just social media posts. I mean, we have colleagues who, not every colleague would be a great fit to work with Alex and me either. You know, like they have different needs and skill sets, and like they are used to working in certain contexts. And we're really grassroots in what we do. High
standards, low expectations. That's what we do.
Interesting, because like I said, what's like one of the weird things I had a revelation of was that the students I first taught was 10 years ago. So they were 18 and I was 29. Now 10 years later, they're 29 and I'm 39. So they're now at the age. And so one of them is my colleague here at A&M. Like he got a job here, and like I helped him get a job. And so he was 18 when I met him, and I was 29, and now he's 29, and the people he's teaching are 18, right?
So cool.
And, he runs a newspaper. It's called the San Antonio Scuba. He started it up himself. He also has GA Media Productions, which is a production company. So he does freelance production work he's been doing since he was 18. And then he started this newspaper when he was kind of trying to decide what he wanted to do with his life, and then kind of just kept it going. And
that's cool.
He's definitely in that space like you all are, where he is putting money into this newspaper, you know, this online newspaper, but it's not like his revenue is exceeding his expenses yet. He's been running it for 2 years. And so it's like he's having to have those kind of hard topics where he's working through one, like finding writers he can afford that are reliable, right? Finding social media that are reliable.
It's tough.
Also, like working on a budget, right? And I'm talking like $50 a month, paying someone to just do a little task, right? And then having interns as well. He has interns that do intern work, and then on top of that, like really having to admit and work through the ROI part and recircle back on meetings. Like he just had a meeting. We're lucky to be part of the Alliance for Women in Media in San Antonio. And we were able to meet some of the best sales people. Like there's this woman, Mary Lanu Gers, who I'm going to have on my podcast at some point. And she's been doing sales for over 30 years. She works for Cox Media, which is like one of the biggest media companies in the nation. And so she does all the radio sales. So like the rock station and oldies and FM, like old school. But she's 100% commission based, her salary.
Oh, wow.
She lives that life, and she's been living it for 35 years, you know, and she does all right. You know, she does really well.
She's good at what she does, I guess.
You know what I'm saying? And that's like, because that's the most intimidating thing a lot of times as a judgmental academic prick. Sometimes people are like, oh, it's 100% commission. That can't be a job. That's just people wanting to take advantage of you, and you're like, oh, you like work for like one of the, really large company and you work off 100% commission and you've been doing it for 35 years and you're happy and you love people and like you work with people. I'm like, Johnny, this is my student I mentor. I'm like, you need to sit down and have a meeting with her about your newspaper.
Right? Yeah, it sounds like it. That'd be good.
And he had one, and that's kind of like why I mentioned some of the entrepreneurial stuff is just because it's like
Yeah.
I see that y'all are on that cusp. Y'all are like right there. Like y'all are gonna start figuring out how to like not just make money doing this, but to make the money in the way you want to make it.
Yeah,
On the terms
exactly.
you do it on, because that's what's been kind of really neat to see you all do is that you're very high end about what you do.
Yeah.
Like you said, you can't just take someone on and take them with it, which is not what I'm suggesting whatsoever.
No, we know.
but but y'all have a lot of talent, and y'all have the ability. Y'all speak very well. Y'all don't fool around when it comes to diving. Y'all aren't joking about it, and
No.
you're also very serious about the ecological side. Like you'll have things that just really, I think, are intangibles when you add it all up together. So that's why I was like, just y'all at the end of this talk, y'all like just got my head turning. I was like, man, I've got to. I know we should have ended, but like, I've got.
Yeah, we blew up your podcast.
Oh my God, smashed it.
I've got to be deeper with y'all about this because you just, I don't know. I want to see y'all succeed. I want this to not just.
Well, thanks.
So that was when we gave up right after that podcast.
That was it. That was the beginning of the end. Yeah.
No, is that y'all like go? This is like remember when, and and so I'm just really excited to see where y'all take things and build your business as an entrepreneur. It's like it's really just awe-inspiring to be.
Well, thanks.
So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Oh, makes us feel all warm and fuzzy inside. Thanks.
Well, thank y'all so much for being on my podcast. I think we'll wrap up right here, and we can all wave goodbye and say
7 hours later.